Yeah, that's a great point. And I think one of the things you spoke about when you were talking about more the kind of MSP service procurement management offering, scoping's a big problem for a
It's
lot
a
of
huge
lot of
problem. Yeah.
organizations. Like you say, you can get these confusing things where there's kind of nothing.
Yeah, it's puzzling. What did we buy and what are we actually paying for? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously projects change over time as well. So just
Mhm.
having that clear communication around what's promised and what's delivered at any point in time is such a benefit for both the buying organization and the service provider, because otherwise also the service providers can get really messed around in terms of just being hauled over the coals for stuff that is not there. The issue is not down to them. So it's helping to build these relationships by starting with a clear identification of exactly what everybody's kind of committing to.
Yeah,
um,
and accountabilities. And as you talk, and this came up in the scenario I just described, with that client as we start digging through it. You're right, supplier, it's easy to blame the provider, right? And they do tend to get raked over the coals, but a lot of that does go back to exactly what you're describing, the detail around the scope and the understanding of accountabilities, because the clients do have accountabilities too. And there are there's a waterfall, right? Supplier cannot move forward if they don't get sign off on requirements from the client up front, right? So if that date moves, then the supplier's date moves, et cetera. And so it's not just about building a quality statement of work or project governance that defines what the supplier's accountabilities are. It's also the customer's accountabilities and the governance by which they manage through those.
Yeah, and it must be really interesting also from your point of view, looking at how organizations approach the kind of decision around how to get the work done in
Yeah.
terms of the options. So for you guys as a provider, there's various ways that you could fulfill work they need to do. With obviously one key
Yeah.
area being this kind of project services approach. And it comes back to something you mentioned earlier, which was around liability. And in
Mhm.
terms of the responsibility for the delivery of the work rather than just people in place doing
Yeah.
work. That's something that I think sometimes organizations or buyers can take a knee jerk reaction to think it's more expensive to do it that way. But it's like, well, I would always play devil's advocate and say, well, how can you prove it? How long, how do you know how long it's going to take if you just hire some people and put them in a room? Are there clear objectives? Where you're actually going with it?
Yeah.
What and when is the end point? So that would be my devil's advocate on it,
What
position on it.
happens if it goes wrong? Yeah.
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 So the understanding, the acceptance of the cost benefit ratio, taking into account that moving that liability to the supplier in terms of the delivery risk, that makes a big difference for the organization. And that's where, as we were talking earlier about the different kind of work delivery channels,
Yeah.
that's where the C-suite and the executives of the organization and that kind of workforce planning layer need to be able to look at all of their available options and say, what's the best way, as you say, starting with the work, what's the best way to get this done? And it's great to see more organizations really latching onto that now.
And that is part of that trend that we talk about. And what's I think an important call out here, as you were speaking, is that assurance, that risk transference from buyer to supplier at a premium. I think it's easiest to identify when there is a firm deliverable, but so many of the engagements are time and material based. Which is okay. But there's still, if properly scoped, there still can be accountabilities, right? So what is it? So it's not maybe T&M, but what's the project management associated with that? Are there certain service levels that the supplier is making as it relates to those resources that they're billing for on a time and material basis? Do they have any accountability for the quality of the work output that their teams are delivering? So it's I often hear about it as it relates to deliverables based or milestone based statements of work, but it's not limited to it. And we come back to exactly where we were 5, 10 minutes ago, talking about the importance of proper scoping and requirements gathering.
Yeah, exactly. And ultimately, what are the deliverables? They could be anything. They could be
Mhm.
KPIs in ongoing service delivery.
Yes,
They
yes.
could be blocks of consulting time, as you say, T&M effectively. Resource. They could be sprints in an agile process. They could be pure project deliverables. It's very flexible, but the whole point is you're defining what the outputs are going to be, whatever they might be.
That's right.
And you're allowing that to change, and you're putting assurance and governance around it and clear expectations with it.